He didn't fire me in private, he made a show of it. In front of 20 colleagues, with my Slack account already deactivated and my email access revoked, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You'll be penniless by Friday." That sentence has echoed in my head every day since. And if you're hearing this story now, stick around. Because the man who swore he'd destroy me had no idea what was coming next. Subscribe if you want to hear exactly how it unfolded. Because this isn't just about revenge. It's about survival. The day started like any other, except for the pit in my stomach. Something felt off when my badge didn't open the side door the first time. I thought it was just a glitch until I noticed the IT guy standing by the elevator, avoiding my eyes. My desk phone was dark, too, no dial tone. But I forced myself to sit down, open my laptop, and log into the internal system. Locked. Credentials revoked. Every window I clicked led to the same cold gray screen. Access denied. Minutes later, his assistant marched down the hallway and told me there was a mandatory team meeting in the main conference room. I grabbed a notepad, pretending not to notice the whispers trailing behind me. Inside, the entire operations team was already seated. My boss stood at the head of the table, arms folded, smirking like he was about to unveil a magic trick. He started with small talk, thanking everyone for bearing with some transitions. Then he looked right at me and announced, "Effective immediately, this department is being reorganized. Some roles are no longer necessary, and that includes yours." I felt my face burn, but before I could process the words, he clicked his laptop, and on the screen behind him flashed a PowerPoint slide. Exiting staff, my name. The gasps around the room were real. He had staged this moment. He didn't just want to fire me, he wanted to humiliate me. I stood frozen, trying to steady my breathing while he kept talking. Some people don't adapt to change. Some people think they're irreplaceable. But here at our company, no one is above the team. He tapped his finger on the desk, leaned forward, and added, "If you're smart, you'll sign the severance packet by Friday. If not, well, you'll find this industry has a long memory. You'll be penniless before the month is over." No one said a word. My coworkers shifted in their seats, avoiding eye contact. My throat tightened, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. I slid my pen into my pocket, closed my notebook, and walked out. By the time I reached my desk, security was already there with a cardboard box. They didn't let me pack, just told me to take my coat and leave. My personal files, years of notes, photos, even the ceramic mug my sister had given me, they were all swept into storage like I was a criminal under investigation. I stepped into the freezing air outside, my phone buzzing with a flood of sympathetic texts from coworkers, too afraid to speak up in the room. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. That's when a new notification appeared, a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. I pressed play, expecting a recruiter or maybe my bank. Instead, a calm voice said just 7 words that stopped me in my tracks. "Do not sign anything." I heard what he said. The message cut off. No name, no explanation, just silence. And for the first time that day, my boss's smug words, "You'll be penniless by Friday," didn't feel like the final word. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face again, smug and triumphant, telling a room full of my colleagues that I was finished. But humiliation has a strange effect on the mind. It sharpens things. Instead of replaying the insult, I started replaying the last year of my life. Every late night, every corner cut at his command. Every file I saved twice, because I knew he'd try to twist the truth later. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just leaving with empty hands. I was leaving with receipts. If you're listening to this, let me be clear. Workplaces don't always ruin you in one blow. They chip away slowly until the day you realize the job you thought was your safety net has turned into a cage. When I first joined, I was excited. I loved operations, the invisible gears that keep a company running. I knew the systems inside out, and for a while it felt like I mattered. But over time, my boss began to shape the rules differently. "Don't log those hours," he'd say. Clients don't need to see all the back and forth. When I questioned the math, he leaned in with that fake smile and said, "Do you want to be seen as a team player or as a problem?" I wanted to believe it was normal. Everyone in the office seemed to accept it. We were all salaried contractors, a contradiction I didn't even realize was illegal at the time. We were told to track 40 hours but work 60. Bonuses? Promised in writing, delivered as maybe next quarter. My name never appeared on final reports, even though half the systems wouldn't have existed without me. "The client doesn't need to know who wrote it," he told me once. "You're behind the scenes. That's your role. Behind the scenes." That phrase stuck with me. He liked me invisible, until the day he wanted me humiliated. The deeper I thought, the clearer the pattern became. He hadn't just fired me. He had been preparing the trap for months. Like the time I discovered the payroll discrepancy. 8 missing overtime hours for 3 staffers. When I raised it, he said, "We'll roll it into next pay cycle." It never appeared. I kept copies of the timesheets anyway, or the compliance training. He skipped it every year, but forced us to click through slides at midnight and sign attendance logs we never attended. I had screenshots of the timestamps, most of which were impossible for one person to complete legally. And then there were the emails. His favorites were short, with no subject line, just one-liners. "Fix this and don't tell finance. Bill it as external consulting." This never happened. I had them all. When HR sent me the severance packet the next morning, I knew the voicemail wasn't random paranoia. The contract was a minefield. Non-disparagement, meaning I could never speak about what happened, even in therapy. A non-compete for 12 months across the entire sector, even though my job wasn't executive level. And most insulting of all, a clause saying I'd voluntarily resigned, making me ineligible for unemployment. And the payout? 3 weeks' salary. That was it. After years of building systems from scratch, after holding entire launches together by myself, they thought 3 weeks would buy my silence. I stared at the document for hours, heart pounding, until I remembered the voice message. "Do not sign anything." I heard what he said. The next day, I tested my luck. I called the number back. No answer. I left a voicemail. "Whoever you are, I need to know what you mean. Please call me back." That evening, the phone finally rang. The voice was calm, deliberate. "You don't know me, but I was in that building yesterday. I heard him threaten you, and I know someone you need to talk to. She's an attorney. Employment law. Don't sign a thing until she looks at it." I sat there in silence, my hands gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles hurt. I had been spiraling into fear, convinced I was cornered. But now I realized something else. He wasn't the only one watching, and this time I wasn't going to stay behind the scenes. The lawyer's office wasn't flashy. No marble floors, no receptionists in designer heels. Just a quiet building with scuffed linoleum and a waiting room that smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. That made me nervous at first. Shouldn't the person defending my entire career be sitting behind glass walls and skyline views? But the moment she shook my hand, I realized why the stranger had sent me here. Her grip was firm, her voice steady. "Tell me only what you can prove," she said before I'd even sat down. I laid everything out. The public firing, the severance contract, the threats, the locked accounts, the missing overtime. For 2 hours I spoke until my throat was raw. She didn't interrupt, just a scribbled notes with a fountain pen that scratched across the page like a blade. When I finally ran out of words, she leaned back and tapped her pen against the folder. "Okay," she said calmly. "Here's what you need to understand. What your boss did isn't just cruel, it's illegal, multiple times over." She broke it down in plain English. Retaliation. They fired me right after I raised payroll discrepancies. That alone was enough to trigger protection under employment law. Wage theft. Those missing overtime hours weren't just oversights. They were evidence. Misclassification. Calling us salaried contractors was a textbook violation. They owed back pay and penalties. The NDA and non-disparagement, unenforceable. Courts threw those out when they were designed only to silence whistleblowers. And the non-compete clause? Void. I wasn't an executive. They couldn't legally prevent me from working in my own field. Then she smiled for the first time. And your boss making threats in front of witnesses? That's gold, especially if anyone will back you up. Did anyone record the meeting? I told her no, but then I remembered the text messages, the ones coworkers sent me right after. One read, "I'm so sorry. What he did was disgusting." Another, "We heard everything. Stay strong." She nodded. That's contemporaneous evidence. Juries love that. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the ground under my feet again. She outlined the plan. First, a demand letter. Severance renegotiated into full back pay, unpaid overtime, damages for retaliation, and attorney's fees. Second, a notice of claim to the labor board. Third, we'd prepare for litigation in case they refused. They'll try to intimidate you, she warned. But you've got more leverage than you realize. I asked about the severance packet. She slid it back across the desk with one finger. Do not sign this, ever. It's poison. You'd be trading silence for pennies. I exhaled, shaky but relieved. Now, she added, lowering her voice, tell me about the files. I hesitated. Then I explained how I'd kept duplicates. Clean, time-stamped copies of timesheets, screenshots of emails and project drafts showing exactly who contributed what. I told her about the system logs that proved he had overridden approvals. Her eyes narrowed. You understand how powerful this is, right? Most people walk in here with nothing but their word. You walked in with a paper trail. We spent the next hour assembling a timeline. Every late-night email, every unpaid hour, every retaliatory comment. She asked me to rank the documents from strongest to weakest, then color-coded the evidence into categories. Wage theft, retaliation, misclassification, intimidation. By the time I left her office, I was exhausted, but no longer afraid. For the first time, the humiliation of that public firing felt less like an ending and more like a fuse. The next morning, my boss's inbox lit up with her letter. Calm, professional, devastating. It outlined every violation, cited case law, and gave them 7 days to respond. At the bottom, in bold, if this matter is not resolved, we will proceed to formal litigation. I almost felt sorry for him when I imagined his face reading it. Almost. Because what he didn't know yet was that the stranger who told me not to sign anything had set in motion a storm he couldn't stop. And when my lawyer spoke, people listened. The company didn't wait 7 days. They fired back in 2. A courier dropped a thick envelope at my door, stamped with the logo of a law firm so large it practically screamed intimidation. The first page was a letter dripping with arrogance. Your claims are unfounded. Any suggestion of misconduct is categorically denied. We demand you withdraw your allegations immediately. I felt my stomach sink until I read further. Buried in the legal jargon were 2 tactics my lawyer had warned me about. First, they demanded the case be moved into private arbitration. No jury, no headlines, no public record. Second, they accused me of poor performance and insubordination, attaching cherry-picked emails that made me look careless or defiant. I carried the packet straight to my lawyer. She read it without flinching, then smirked. Classic. They're playing offense because they know their defense is weak. We sat down together and crafted the counterpunch. For every vague insult they lobbed at me, we matched it with concrete proof. They claimed I failed to meet deadlines. We had project logs showing I delivered ahead of schedule, with client praise attached. They said I ignored instructions. We had emails where I followed his directives word for word, directives that violated policy. They accused me of unprofessional behavior. We had text messages from coworkers the night of my firing. He crossed the line. We all saw it. But the strongest card wasn't mine. It was theirs. One of the clients, a major account worth millions, had noticed my sudden disappearance. They emailed support, asking where I'd gone. The message leaked back to me through a friend still at the company. Without my name, these deliverables are slipping. Who's handling operations now? That single line was dynamite. It proved I wasn't expendable. I was critical, and they had just sabotaged themselves by proving it in writing. My lawyer sent our reply, meticulous, devastating, impossible to ignore. She dismantled their arbitration demand by pointing out state law protections. She highlighted every documented violation, adding potential statutory penalties that dwarfed what I'd originally asked for. And she attached the client's email at the end, like a dagger slipped neatly between the ribs. Days passed. I tried to distract myself with routine, making coffee, scrolling job boards, pretending not to feel the weight of my bank account draining. But every time I doubted, another message would come through. A coworker telling me, "We miss you." A friend whispering that HR looked spooked. And then one night, another envelope arrived, thinner this time. Inside was a single-page letter offering a final settlement. It was higher than the original 3 weeks' pay. Now it was 3 months. But it came with the same poison. NDA, non-compete, silence. I read it 3 times. It felt almost generous until I remembered my boss's words. "You'll be penniless by Friday." No, not this time. I called my lawyer, voice steady. "We don't take it, we push." She paused. "That means war. Are you ready?" I thought of the cardboard box, of my mug in some storage closet, of the smirk on his face while my coworkers sat in silence. "I've been ready since the day he put my name on that slide," I said. She laughed softly. "Good, because next week we speak in front of the board, and when we do, your boss won't be smirking anymore." The boardroom was colder than I expected. Not the temperature, the atmosphere. A long glass table stretched across the room, lined with bottled water and untouched notepads. At one end sat the board of directors, stone-faced and unreadable. At the other, my boss, leaning back like he owned the oxygen in the room. Beside him were 2 attorneys from the firm that had sent me the threatening letters, their briefcases gleaming like weapons. And then there was my lawyer. She didn't bring a briefcase, just a slim folder tucked under her arm and a legal pad she didn't bother opening. She looked out of place until she started speaking. "Before we begin," she said evenly, "let's be very clear. This is not a negotiation over feelings. This is about violations of law, supported by evidence." She slid the first document onto the table. Timesheets. Page after page of hours worked and hours paid that didn't match. "This is wage theft," she said. "State law mandates treble damages." The company's attorney opened his mouth, but she cut him off with a raised hand. "Next." She placed down screenshots of emails with subject lines like, "Fix this and don't tell finance." She didn't editorialize. She didn't need to. The words spoke for themselves. "Retaliation," she continued. "My client raised payroll discrepancies. Days later, she was fired in a public setting where your executive explicitly threatened her financial ruin. Multiple witnesses confirmed this. Some even texted contemporaneous statements. She dropped a stack of printouts onto the glass. I recognized the text from my coworkers, each time stamped the day of the firing. One of the directors leaned forward, adjusting his glasses to read them. The company's second attorney tried again. "We believe those messages are subjective." My lawyer's voice didn't rise, but it cut like steel. "Subjective? How about this?" She pressed play on her phone. The room filled with the tinny recording of a voicemail. "Do not sign anything." I heard what he said. A ripple of unease passed across the board. My boss shifted in his chair, finally sitting upright. "Let's move on," my lawyer said calmly, sliding the severance packet into the center of the table. "This document is riddled with unenforceable clauses. The non-compete violates state law. The NDA attempts to silence protected whistleblowing activity. And the so-called voluntary resignation is falsification designed to deny unemployment benefits." If this ever sees a courtroom, you won't just lose. You'll be sanctioned. Silence. The only sound was the quiet hum of the HVAC system. Then she leaned in slightly, her tone sharper. Now let's talk about the client email. A multi-million-dollar account explicitly asked about my client's absence, noting slippage in deliverables. If we proceed, this isn't just labor law. This is breach of fiduciary duty. You concealed material risk from a client, and you did it while retaliating against the one person keeping operations afloat. That landed like a hammer. One of the board members turned to my boss. "Is this true?" he asked flatly. My boss stammered. For the first time since the day he fired me, he didn't look smug. He looked cornered. "That's taken out of context," he muttered. She was never a team player. She undermined me," my lawyer cut in smoothly. "Team player? Let me show you what your own clients thought." She placed down a letter of commendation signed just weeks before my firing, praising my role in a successful rollout. The ink was barely dry. The room shifted. The board wasn't just listening, they were recalibrating. "Here's the offer," my lawyer concluded, her voice steady, almost gentle. "Full back pay, treble damages for wage theft, legal fees, a neutral reference, a retraction of defamatory statements. Or we proceed to litigation where these documents, recordings, and witness statements become public record. No theatrics, no shouting, just cold, surgical truth," the board whispered among themselves. My boss's face had turned a blotchy red. Finally, one director spoke. "We'll take this under advisement. We'll be in touch." We walked out together. My knees were shaking, but my lawyer's stride was calm, unhurried. In the hallway, she turned to me with the faintest smile. "When I told you to bring proof, I didn't expect you to bring a war chest," she said. "They're rattled. They'll cave." And for the first time, I believed her. It didn't take long. 3 days after the boardroom meeting, another envelope arrived. This one thinner, but heavier somehow. My lawyer slid it open, scanned the pages, and passed it across the table with a satisfied nod. It was all there. Back pay for every unpaid hour, treble damages for the wage theft, full attorney's fees, a neutral reference letter drafted and signed by the company, and a clause requiring my boss to retract his defamatory statements in writing. But there was one more line, buried near the bottom. "Executive name has resigned, effective immediately." I read it twice before the meaning sank in. He wasn't just gone, he'd been forced out. The man who swore I'd be penniless by Friday had been stripped of his power by the very people he thought would protect him. I expected to feel triumph. What I felt was something quieter, deeper, relief, justice. The kind that doesn't come with applause, just a steady exhale after holding your breath too long. 2 weeks later, I got an email from one of our biggest former clients. "We heard you're consulting now. Would you be open to a conversation?" That first contract alone was larger than my old salary for an entire year. I said yes, of course, but on my terms. I hired 2 colleagues my boss had underpaid for years, brought them onto my new team, and built something we could finally be proud of. The day we signed the deal, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, where I'd tucked away the retraction letter. The language was stiff, clearly written by lawyers, but one line stood out. Any statements previously made regarding my name were inaccurate and regrettable. I folded the letter carefully and set it aside. I didn't need to frame it, didn't need to parade it around. The real victory was sitting across from me, my new team, smiling, clinking coffee mugs in celebration. Some nights, though, I still hear his words in my head. "You'll be penniless by Friday." And I smile, because Friday came and went. And I wasn't penniless. I was free.